We are up to the Ches. Amalala would say Gemara, and we'll start from Zion on days in the bottom. So Abaye was giving us the Shitta, a number of opinions that they all more or less hold a similar principle that a sukkah is more than just a temporal dwelling; it has to be more of a permanent nature. And then it manifests itself in different ways. One of the ways we said was an argument whether you can have a circular sukkah. And there's one opinion that you can have a circular sukkah, and the other one says you can't. Says the Gemara, this is the Achedim. We say that it's possible it has no corners. Amr Yechan and Sukkah comes along Rabbi Yechan and says as follows. Sukkah ho asuya kekifshan, if a sukkah is a circular like a furnace, im yesh behekefa. If in the circumference, and Baruch Hashem in the Gemara here we have a lot of pictures, so it makes it a bit easy for us to contemplate what's going on here. So all those dots in that circle over there are people. So if you have 24 people sitting in the circle, there is shade as kosher. We'll soon see how you get a cheshbon of 24. But if not, the sukkah is possible. Says the Gemara, come on. If the sukkah is only 7 tvachim by second tvachim, like by Shama, which we paskin like, where does 24 people fit in? Barely one person can fit in. So it must be a much larger sukkah. The only other sukkah we know that's greater than 7 by 7 is 4 amas by 4 amas. So it must be, come on, Kerebi. It must be that this opinion is following Rebbe. 4 amas by 4 amas square, which is a 16 amma circumference. So how do we get to jump to 24? Says the Gemara, come on, Kerebi, don't make sukkah shein bar arba amas al arba amas. So sukkah doesn't have 4 by 4 is possible. Let's understand. Gavra ba'amsa yasef. Every person takes up an amma. In fact, according to Beishama, he says he needs. According to Beishama, says a sukkah is 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. A person has to sit inside. A person takes up an amma. According to Shama, you need 7 because we want part of the table to be inside the sukkah as well. So what's a person only takes up an amma, so which means basically that if you have 24 people, you're talking about a circumference of 24 amas. How do you get to that cheshbon? If we have 4 amas, if the since by a square, or we need 4 by 4, we have a rule that the diameter is 1 to 3.14, or the Gemara rounds it off to 1 to pi, which is 1 to 3. So l'chayda, how in the world do you get to 24? It says the Gemara, we know that the diameter is a tefach, the circumference is 3 tvachim. If we round it down, 12 should be sufficient. You need 4. If it's a square, the 4 tvachim is the thing. It should be 12. So 4 amas should be 12 amas. How do you get to 24? You double that. Says the Gemara, Hani mili. When do we say that be'igula in a circle? In a circle, the circumference versus the diameter is the ratio of pi. But when it comes to a square, you need larger. Like when you look at the picture right here, so you have the circle inside, but the square is larger than the circle. So obviously, the circumference of the circle isn't sufficient, and that's why we had to jump to 24. So I don't understand. How much greater is this? It's very simple. A square is 4, so 4 by 4 squared is 16. The diameter we said to the circumference is pi, so it's 1 to 3.14 or 1 to 3, which is 12. So at max, you should have to have a 16 people sitting around there to form a square. How do you get 24? How much is a square larger than a circle? Only a quarter, right? So you get from 12 to 16, which is a quarter. Is b'shitzes sagi 16 people would have been enough. Says the Gemara, hani mini be eagle the nofik megoyed. That's if you have a circle inside the square. The problem is that we need a 4 by 4 square, which means the square has to be inside the circle. And the circle's circumference now is larger than the square. So if the square is 16, which we just said, then the circle has to be greater than that. And that's why we jumped to 24. But if you put a square inside a circle, you need a larger man. Because all these extra corners over here, the circle is surrounding the square. I still don't understand. Merdi, so let's take the square and turn it into a diagonal. Merdi, what's the diagonal of the square? And that'll be the diameter. What's the diagonal of a square? We had a rule we had before already that it's a 1 to 1.4. Diagonal is 1.4 greater than the 1. So if you're going to have a square, if you're going to have a side 4, then the diagonal has to be 5 3/5. Right? It's 1 point. It's a point for 1. 0.4 more. So if it's 5 3/5, you multiply that by 3 because that's the diameter now of the circle, and it's a pi. It's a 3. 3 times 5 3/5 works out to 16 4/5, not 24. So the Gemara Mechdi Kolam so Beribua so it's a 1 to 1.4. The diagonal compared to the straight line is B'Shivsen Chumsha Sagi 16 4/5 would be enough. So the Gemara Loidak wasn't that particular. He meant the Hitaka had to be 16 4/5, so he jumped to 24. So what are you talking about? If you would have rounded off to 17, I understand. From 16 4/5 to 24? No. Do we say Loidak? It's very hard to understand how you get Mark Shisha, the son of Chizda, talking to Rav Ashi. Rav Chizda was Rabba's colleague. So Mark Shisha would have been at the time of Abaye and Rav. And according to one day in Tesis and the Zion and Beis in Bobasa, he was the oldest son of Rav Chizda. How in the world is he talking to Rav Ashi? So if you look at the Rambam, that Rav Ashi actually lived in the times of Rav, then it's no problem. But look at Rashi, the little you getting there that Rav Ashi was born the day that Rav passed away, this is impossible. Now, for some reason, this doesn't bother anybody. What bothers people are the next line in the Gemara, a few lines from now, and they give it their answer, and I think it would be exactly the other way around. We'll see in a minute. We made this conclusion a while ago as well. Come back to this. So Makshish, so Rashi, mi sovred gavra ba'amsa yosef. Do you think a person can sit in Amma? Tlosa gavra betati amsa yosef. He didn't give us a measurement in Ammas. He just told us people. 24 people is actually 18 Ammas. Kama havalu shitz. Sorry, not 18, 16. It's 24. If you a third off, comes 16. So so reality, what he meant was what Rabbi Yechon was saying, that in 24 people of circumference, he meant 60 people. Now Taket 16 4/5, so he rounded it off. Anan Shivsa the Chichum Shabinin, Loidak. It wasn't particular. If he, by that being medaka, is being machmer, but the cooler minutes, so really you need 16 4/5, and he said that's no 16 is good enough. That could be a big toss. Omelet of Asi Rashi. Here the Mephoshim have a hard time. Where's Rav Asi? Rav Asi was in times where it was a Talmud Rabbi Yechon, even generation before Abaye Rav. And he's at Yisrael and he's a Bogel. Yeah, but the years. Forget about the place. But that isn't the problem. Our problem is that Rav Asi might have gone to bubble during one of the time of bubble. Our problem is the years don't collect and so on and so forth. So therefore, they want to change. No, they say it's not two Rav Asis, but we have to say it's two Rav Ashis, not two Rav Asis. It's two Rav Ashis. Otherwise, the previous Gemara is hard to understand, especially going to Rashi. Let's go back to the original. Maybe learn Gavra B'Amsa Yosef. No, so it goes back to that question. The 24 Amos he's saying, and we know we worked out 16 4/5. But Rabbi Yochanan Mokum Gavri like a chashiv. You thought he's talking the outer circumference. No, the place of the people he's not counting. Therefore, if a person's an amma, you take off an amma on one side, take an amma on the other side. So actually, it's 6 ammas. If we go around and we count 24 ammas, right, circumference. But take off a person on this side. The people were the circumference, but he's not. You thought that the circumference included these people. Therefore, you came up to the conclusion that a circumference of 24 ammas. The circumference is minus these people, which means you take off an amma on this side, take off an amma on this side, because each person, Gabra B'Amsa Yosef, leaves you 6 ammas in between instead of 8. And 6 times 3 is 18. So therefore, the circumference really of this sukkah has to be 18 ammas. Says the Gemara, Kama Havlut, how many say 18? B'Shivsa Nechichum Shasagi is 16 and 4 is enough. Your dog will chumra. Must be 18 was a magic number back then. Otherwise, the Gemara should have said, say 17. If you want to round it off to a full unit, an integer, say 17. We're just happy with 18. Chai is it was a. I guess people gave donations in those days also. Chai. Don't know. Says the Gemara, Rabbanon the Kisari, but others say Dayoni the Kisari. It wasn't the Rabbanon, was the Yoni. Amri, they say the following. We agree with the first part that you said. Igula the Nafik Megoydavua, a circle inside a square riva is a quarter or less. In other words, remember we said the circle is 12 and the square is 16. Okay, but Where we argue is ribua the nafik megoyigul. If you put a square inside a circle, palga, the circle is double or 50% greater than the circle. Whereas if the chazin will have a kolai, everyone can see that's not so. Very difficult to more with the day on Kasadi thinking. So this long thesis, and don't ask me to explain to you what it says because I personally don't know either. Explain, and other Rishonim explain that the Gemara misunderstood Dayani de Kasari. They took it literally, and therefore they misunderstood. They said, we're talking about the Dayanim here, or the Rabbanim there. How can they make such a apparent mistake where you say the Chazin and the Havikulai? So there's different shots. Says the Gemara, Rav Levi, Mishum Rav Meir, Rav Levi said Rav Meir, stay Sukkos. Well, Taisus goes ahead and explains it. Okay. You have time, if you put a math, work it out. Rav Levi Mishum Rav Meir. Stay Sukkos shel Yotzim. You have two, let's say Sukkos, like temporary dwellings of potters, Zoom, like you have these milk bars, somebody lives behind the milk bar. So this was sort of temporary dwellings, and they had the residence was behind, and the forefront was where they did all this work, like his warehouse, little garage. Haprimi ain't a sukkah. It's a house. It's not a sukkah. The chayev is mezuzah. It's a permanent dwelling. Now, why isn't there a sukkah there inside? If it's built, we're talking about obviously built kosher. If it's not built kosher, I'm talking about. So Rashi comes up with a new idea. Rashi says, you know why it's not a kosher sukkah? Even though we paskin, you don't need a sukkah l'shem chag. So Rashi says, "Hoch." I'm just quoting Rashi. Hoch ain't a sukkah. You know why it's not a sukkah? The minkra milsa the l'shem sukkah. It's not recognizable that this sukkah that you're living in today. I thought it wasn't built, but you're living today is a sukkah. You live there every day. Looks like your house. So how does it look like a sukkah? Where does it say it has to look like a sukkah? Rashi comes on new halacha. It has to look like a sukkah, which is clear that Rashi holds l'chayt it's only the rabban. Not Mahatrade, because nowhere does it say in Menam is that the sukkah, when you're saying the sukkah, what about all these people who are living in the house and they just take the roof off and put on schach, which we had in Gemara as well. We had before, the dollar and olive. With walls, we don't care. It's the schach. What I'm saying is that people see you there, and this place has kosher schach as well. But because you live there all the time, they don't realize it. So over here with Novos, because you change your roof to schach, like people are outside, inside and seeing what's going on. It's clear to the Rabban. Other Rishonim learn that's Mahatreda, and the Psul is interesting. The Ritva and others learn it's Ta'asiv Eloi Min Ha'os. When you build a sukkah is built. It was built l'shem temporary dida. Here you built it for your house. Now you can use it as a temporary dida. So how did it? What changed? What did you do? Nothing. It's in your head. So it's ta'aseh, when you make a sukkah, it has to be done in a kosher way. Not after it was done as a house, and the bias is no good. In fact, how do you know you're not allowed to live in your house? Where does it say not allowed to live in your house? So so Rashi says the word here later on. Sukkah means temporary. Sukkah is lebayis. The Ritva and others may learn no, because ta'aseh v'loy min asrik. The problem is that there has to. But you're staying in the house, and now in your mind you're going to sit there like a temporary dwelling. You have to by itself. That's the problem. Things are such a simple thing that you can't live in your house. That's where it comes from. Back to the Gemara, but Yechai Mezuzah. Why? Because you live there. It's a residence. But the outer room where you don't live there, just use it as a warehouse or a manufacturing place. Is a chitzayna sukkah is a kosher sukkah because nobody lives there. That's why you're living there. Obviously, the sukkah. Why? Because nobody lives there. Says the Gemara, and it's a temporary. So when he says this, that's not what he carries on his business. When he says it's we're talking about temporary. It's a sukkah, not a bias. Right. So the whole structure is very. So even he carries on his business every single day. Yeah, exactly. It's a temporary structure. That's what it is. Whatever the material is used, it's a temporary structure. And actually says actually says that all you use it for is like an entrance way, and you meet your business partner, your business clients, and it's a temporary dwelling. Says the Gemara, why is it potter to have a chatzonic even though on its own it doesn't let it be an entrance to the main thing. This and the Gemara should do like kaviyah. The Gemara says because it's not kavua. In other words, When do we say a Beishar is chayiv? Only if it's a permanent structure. Even the Gemara says a Beishar is chayiv. But here the whole thing is not a permanent structure. The house itself is not a permanent structure. So the machlekes are showing him here. We know Beishar is chayiv ma'atoyra, chayiv rabbanan. It depends where the Beishar is going to. How do we learn pshat? And make the Gemara here is talking about only ma'atoyra to reconcile with the other Gemaras we had where Beishar is chayiv. And but Rabbanan you are chayiv, but actually going to tell you particularly says the word ptura. Ptura is not a word you use if you're potter ma'atoyra, but you're chayiv the Rabbanan. And we're right. Gandve, the Rosh Hashanah is Gandve, which we'll soon see what it is. Which is what Sukah's goyim. A goy built himself a temporary place for shelter, or in the summertime, a summer home. Or Sukah's noshim built for women for tznius. Again, they're not chayiv in the sukkah. Sukah's behema, you keep it for behema to shelter them from the hot sun. Sukah's kusim, maybe we bring down a sukkah of kusim as well, where they're not kosher eidim. Mikomakim sheda, you can use their booth as a sukkah. Provided the schach was done properly. Of course, if the schach is not kosher, what's it talk about? Even if you built a pul shem sukkah, if it's not kosher, schach is not kosher. When is the schach kosher? If you put it up there to provide you shade. If you do not put it up there to provide you shade, let's say you put it up there for another reason altogether. And the Rashi says, let's go to Rashi. Amar Rav Chizda, 7 lines in the wide lines. Amar Rav Chizda, Haikir Chosach, the Ka'amar, who is not to tell you need more shade and sun, all that. We know that's the halacha of regardless. It has to be well covered. The muchacham nusa, so then it's obvious. If you only want for modesty, then a modicum of a cover is sufficient. What do you need to put a load on a lot of schach? Obviously, it's protect you from the sun, provide shade. The avagav the sukkah l'shem chag lebinyan l'shem sukkah binyan for sukkah. Well, let's say who the mikaya sukkah shesachech is minachayim. Rashi is saying a lot here. I think Rashi is begoning the question that I asked all the Chayim asked. The Gemara says the sukkah tiyat which Rab Zayda brings. That's the reason why a sukkah l'mayla mechaf is not kosher, because you're not sitting in the shade of the schach. You should be sitting in the shade of the finalist. He brings a passing with sukkah tiyat. And the others are over. Rabbi say ahu lost love Mashiach will come. And Rashi says it clearly because sukkah loy l'shem tzei l'suya. And here the Gemara says, and this is a halacha in Shulchan. So Rashi Bavor is not the same thing. Rashi says here, you're building a normal sukkah and you put normal schach, even though it's not very thick, good enough. Because you build a Hashem sukkah. Over here, you did not build a Hashem sukkah, then you have to put an extra thick layer of schach to be able to tell us that you did a mamish for shade. We need to know you did it for shade. Is Tam sukkah, you didn't build it for these pnias over there, even though it's not the same sukkah and everything else. Good enough. You don't have to be thick. Here it has to be. That seems that Rashi be saying here. Rashi says shemushachech is yofa. Nowhere does it say a normal schach has to be yofa. In fact, we run into all kinds of shilas. It's very thick if you yaitze. As Rabbeinu Tam learned that over here, right here, the Rosh brings them down. The Rabbeinu Tam learned that if you make a sukkah very thick that it protects you from the rain, then you're not yaitze. And Litzel means not for rain. No, it's not very, very thick, just thick. He learned that the Gemara is trying to say pum paket. Not that you should make it extra thick. Don't make it too thick. But it seems clear that's what Rashi's saying. Or another, sorry.
Sorry, it's interesting that they make a kind of a distinction, or that they have to single out that they've got goyim.
But another way of learning Pshat and Rashi, but Klishon doesn't agree with this, is that what I'm thinking now doesn't say Nachreim. The other way what Nachreim say is there's a difference if you build a sukkah, if you're building a sukkah, if you're building a l'shem sukkah, or stop. You're building a l'shem sukkah, then we don't need to have a mindset. You're saying, I'm doing this for sukkahs. That's good enough. If you're building it for these reasons, then you have to have a mindset. That's how they reconcile the two mothers. But Shmuel clearly paskins that a sukkah, when you build a sukkah, it has to be l'shem sukkah. And what's pshat l'shem sukkah? L'shem tzeh. So it seems that this is the other way pshat to learn. We'll get in a minute what you asked. So anyway, right? Another price. Sukkah mekom makom. Oh, sorry. This price says sukkah. It says again, sukkah is always kosher. Mekom makom trailer. What do you mean mekom makom trailer? So you might to add what? Sukkah's rakvish. What's the trade of rakvish? It's not a regular rice. Sukkah's rakvish. Sukkah's royim shepherd. These are all eaten. but you did it for yourself to protect yourself, whatever, from the sun. Sukkahs kayotzim, those people who watch the dry figs and nobody should steal them, or spread out in the field. Sukkahs burgani, and the sukkah that the guard sits in the little guardhouse. Sukkahs shemir pages, or those that sit and watch pages, those guards, as well. Sukkah mekomok shadel, but actually it's be done. We ask the question they might kill chasa. Or we should also tell sukkah to tell. It's made for shade. Sukkah mekomok will see a mile. Sukkah is ganduch. So one Baraisa learns the main thing is rakvish, and the limud, the extra is ganvich. The other one learns ganvich, and the limud is rakvish. What's going on? Hi Tana, the ganvich alimud le ganvich. Ganvich has more reason to say it's a kosher sukkah mishum the kivi. The sukkah ganvich. All of these people there, these are permanent. The katana mikomok, I'll see rakvish. Those houses there are much more permanent, and therefore that's a given. And we're also adding rakvish, which are only for a week or 2 weeks. You're watching the figs they're drying out and so on. High ton the rakvish, a limited rakvish. All those 4 cases of rakvish are all people are chayiv in the sukkah. The royim and the kayotzim and the burgan and the sharikinas, they're all the Eden. They all have the mitzvah of sukkah, so therefore their homes, the temporary homes, could be used as sukkah. But Mashenke in the sukkah ganvich, none of them are chayiv sukkah. None of them are chayiv sukkah. So maybe their temporary dwellings cannot be used as sukkah. The Tana and Mekomok ganvich, still good enough. Okay, that's